Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for the World on the Move, 250,000 Years of Human Migration Grantee Orientation. My name is Brian Russell. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a project director in the American Library Association's Public Programs Office. I'm really excited to see all of you here today and to kick off our work together on this exhibition tour. I'd like to congratulate you once again, as this was a competitive application process and your proposals and unique programming ideas really stood out. Of course, we're here to discuss the background and logistics of the traveling exhibition. This orientation is designed to support all elements of successful project implementation, including exhibit setup and display instructions, marketing and publicity, development of related public programming for middle school aged youth in their communities, community outreach, and project reporting requirements. The point of this orientation is to make sure you feel comfortable being a host and know what to expect when the exhibit arrives at your library. First, I'm going to walk us through the agenda for the next 90 minutes. I will start with some brief housekeeping, and then I would like all of my colleagues and project partners on the call to introduce themselves. We will then hear about some of the project background from the curatorial team. Then ALA will cover some logistics about the stipend payment, reporting requirements, and how the exhibit shipment will work. And then AAA will provide tips for installing the exhibit and talk about the exhibition guide and programming resources. We will reserve the last 15 minutes for Q&A. Everyone in this meeting room has microphone access, but please keep muted for now to minimize background noise. You're welcome to keep your video on or turn it off. Live transcription is enabled. To turn it on, click on the closed caption symbol button at the bottom of the screen next to the reactions button. While we are in this main room, we encourage you to use the chat box. You can also ask questions in the chat or jot down your questions for later as I said, we'll have Q&A at the end. If you have any tech issues, please send a message directly to Megan Gieseker, my Public Programs Office colleague, and she can assist you. And with that, I'm turning things over to Ed Lebow to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ed Lebow, and I'm the Executive Director of the American Anthropological Association, and I'm also the head of the curatorial team. I wonder if we could just go around in some order and each of the team members introduce themselves. Daniel, why don't we start with you?
Hi, I'm Daniel Ginsberg. I'm the Director of Education and Professional Practice at the AAA. I was also on the curatorial team. I use they, them pronouns, and if you can't see me, I'm a middle-aged white person with brown hair pulled back and glasses sitting in front of a blurred background. And next on my screen is Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Koloff. If you can't see me, I'm a white woman with light blonde hair sitting in front of a blurred background. I am the Assistant Director of Education Programs at the American Anthropological Association and also part of the curatorial team. And next on my screen is Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin Younger. I'm a white, middle-aged person with white hair and use she, her pronouns. My role in this project has been as project manager for the development of the exhibition and as author of the installation guide with a lot of help from my colleagues. And I am affiliated with the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage.
Sojin, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Hi, I, like Erin, am based at the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage. My name is Sojin Kim. I am a curator here, and I'm going to toss this to my colleague, Jim Deutsch.
Yeah, thanks, Sojin. So I'm one of Sojin's and Erin's colleagues at the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, working as a curator, though at this very moment I'm in the New York City Municipal Archives, which is why you see large file cabinets behind me. So bring it back to Ed.
Thanks, Jim. And one other member of the American Anthropological Association team who's joined us here today is Barbara Kochard. Barbara?
Hi, my name is Barbara Kochard. I am the fairly new Director of Development at AAA, and I'm just here to listen and be a fly on the wall today. Thanks.
Thank you all for joining us. We're so excited to be here at this moment as we launch this tour of the traveling exhibition. We're going to just spend maybe 15 minutes or so talking about the background to the content of the exhibition. I know that you're interested in hearing some more about the logistics of your relationship with the Public Programs Office at the American Library Association. And then we can also return to tips and tricks that have to do with the installation and eventually de-installation of the exhibit to get it ready to travel to its next stop. Our assumption in designing the exhibit was that it would not need to be accompanied by any technical installation staff. There are no electronic parts to this. The display system itself is one that many of you are likely familiar with. We also appreciate that not all of your library staffs have got docents or educators on hand to actively guide and interact with visitors to the exhibit. And so the design accommodates flexible sort of self-navigation with modular display panels that can be toured in any order. And there is, of course, an online version of the exhibition that has text-to-speech reading to accommodate low and no vision impaired visitors, as well as Spanish language translation to it at this point. The subject of the exhibit is migration and displacement, and it draws on case studies from across human history and the breadth of cultures. And we're hoping to inspire visitors who see the exhibit to be curious about the long history of human migration, to appreciate the complexity and diversity of migration stories, but most importantly, to appreciate that practically everyone, everywhere, has a migration story somewhere in their family history, and that this is something that's a common element of the human condition, and should be something that draws us together rather than separating us apart. So we are indeed aiming to change the conversation. You will see as you dive more deeply into this that people have been on the move for all of human history, and that people move for many, many different reasons. We are using a narrative device of Crossroads to help get this point across. We'll say more about it in a moment, but in some ways it's a play on words, because we're thinking that we are at a crossroads in human history with a set of decisions to make about migration and displacement that will affect the future of millions and millions of people, how we adapt to the changes that migration brings to the way that we live. And also it's a vantage point from which to observe human movement across the planet. Em, can you go to the next slide, please? So you'll see that the exhibition comes in a flexible set of different configurations depending on the space that you have available at your library. It can be set up in either a square or a rectangular, or a longer, skinny kind of hallway setup. But overall, it takes about 1,000 square feet to accommodate it in the in an accessible way. If we could go to the next slide, please. So there are 4 main questions that organize the content. Where do we come from? Next one is, why do we move? The reasons for moving. Third is, how does migration change us, including people who who don't move but are left behind in communities of origin. And then the last question is, where are we going? What does the future of humanity look like with mobility in the equation? Next slide, please. In addition to the displays, you'll see that there's a set of interactive elements. There is some important sort of educational content here, but also some operations, maintenance, and management elements, because you'll see as we get into this that the interactive elements have some moving parts. One has to do with where you come from and the reasons that you and your family may have moved. And there are a bunch of colored poker chips that people can place in various tubes corresponding to answers to those questions. There are also Post-its that people can add to tell more about their own family story, and then a fun sort of exercise that asks people, if they had to move in a hurry and they only could take what they could carry in their hands with them, what sorts of things would they bring with them? There are also a number of flip books that allow you to test your knowledge and awareness about answers to those four main questions. Let's talk just a little bit more about the Crossroads narrative concept itself. Most museums or museum exhibits about migration, and we're going to move through four of them here, tell a story about that emphasizes the destination as the receiver and host of successive waves of new arrivals. So you see the pink swimming figure on the left, that is from the French National Immigration Museum. The dark hallway is an entry point to the British Museum of Migration. And in the US, a large part of the second floor of the National Museum of American History is made up of an exhibit called Many Voices, One Nation, which Jim and Sojin in particular had a hand in the early planning of. Well, we'd like to complicate this narrative and sort of move us away from this orderly sense of time and place. We resist as much as we can this sort of you came here as part of a salad bowl or a melting pot metaphor, because what that ends up doing is privileging people who arrived in a place earlier and kind of putting in, second-class citizenship or othering folks who have come later. And we think that, in fact, our observations, the scholarship on the history of population movements around the globe over a very, very long period of time is much more fluid and dynamic, that people don't necessarily stay in the places to which they move, that there's often cycling back and forth between places. And in addition to that, this idea that people have choice over how, when, and where they move to is something that we think also needs to be complicated some. And so we have chosen the Crossroads concept as an intersection, a place where people from different places meet. It places the visitor at a vantage point where they're able to watch movement back and forth. And it's also, I think, an accessible concept where even people from regions that aren't represented in the exhibition can apply to their communities and experiences. For example, in cities all over the world, the process of gentrification is causing people to move into areas, but also pushing other people out of those areas. Just because we didn't mention your town, whether it's Columbus or San Jose or even Gallup, New Mexico, that doesn't mean that the examples of gentrification that we have pointed to are not relevant, and that gives you a hook, I think, to talk about a number of different forces here. So next slide, please. So we're aiming through this work to tell what most people think is a well-known migration story, but it adds complexity and especially for people who are on the move, agency and dignity. So the first of the crossroads that we are focusing on is the Mediterranean basin, which through history has seen movements of people all the way back to more than 200,000 years ago, but in very contemporary terms to conflict-driven movement across the Mediterranean and into the European area. So this becomes one of the places that we chose. The second of the crossroads that we focus on is an area that we call Beringia. And you can see here the area that's shaded in dark brown shows the land today, but the area shaded in light brown shows land as it was about 14,000 years ago during the last ice age, when sea levels were quite a bit lower. Focusing on this crossroad allows us to talk about the ever-evolving understanding of the peopling of the Americas, because it is our best knowledge these days that people came across the Bering Land Bridge and along the seacoast of the Pacific Ocean to settle in North and South America. The third of the crossroads is Central Africa, and this allows us to tell stories that go back to the early days of human origins, as well as the central kingdoms of Africa and the settling of most of the continent and the origins of the transatlantic slave trade. Many ancestors of today's descendant communities in the Americas had their origins in Central Africa, were forcibly transported to port towns in Western Africa, and then across the Atlantic to the Americas. So this is the third of the crossroads. And then the fourth of the crossroads stories is a much smaller area than the others. This is East Los Angeles. It's the smallest of the four crossroads. It's more tightly bounded, and technically it refers to an unincorporated portion of Los Angeles County that's just east of the LA city boundary. But people nowadays commonly use this term to refer to any one of a number of predominantly Latino communities that are located in this area east of the Los Angeles River. It is literally a physical crossroads. As you can see in one of the images there are 6 freeways and the sprawling East Los Angeles interchange that crisscross it. It's also a cultural crossroads, and in a way that one of our colleagues is fond of saying, all of Southern California is interesting to the extent that the border crossed this area rather than the people crossing the border. We draw on some material that's in here for the East LA Crossroads from a high school during the Second World War, from which the Japanese American students and their families were relocated to interior internment camps and have some really descriptive, wonderful correspondence from students, between students who remained in the city and those that were forcibly relocated to these camps is something that we hope that adolescents, teenagers in your audiences might respond to as well. So I'm going to stop with the overview of the content here and ask Brian and Em to talk some about the Public Programs Office and its involvement in the tour.
Thanks, Ed. Have to say, I think that's the most interesting part to me, for sure, hearing the background of this. I'm now sharing a bunch of logistics, which will be very useful to you, I think, but not quite as interesting to hear. First, I have to say I would be remiss if I did not do this. My colleague in the Public Programs Office, M. Gallagher, uses they, them pronouns, did not introduce themselves at the top of the call. They are who is running the slides and screen sharing right now. And in all reality, you probably have already heard from them many times because they've emailed you about this project. That's how you know to be here today. If you're not familiar with M, send us a message. Their email address will be on a screen at the end. They will be your primary point of contact throughout this entire project. So thank you, Em, and thank you for bringing up this slide. I know I just mentioned it. The first thing I wanted to say a reminder about is ALA Connect. I believe pretty much everyone on this call has already joined. But for those of you who don't know, ALA Connect is a messaging and discussion platform that we will be using as a community of practice throughout this project. If you haven't already, make a free account, and we welcome anyone else from your project team who would like to be included to join as well. And if you need any help being added to the group, please email Em and they can help you out. Once you're in the ALA Connect group, we really encourage you to use it to share program ideas, photos of the installation and exhibit once you have it up in your library, and then any tips and tricks you might discover for an easy install as well. We really want everyone here to be a resource to one another, and this is the space to pose questions to your colleagues and get them answered. The next thing I'll talk about is the programming stipend. We are processing these payments in yearly batches, so program funds have been processed for 2023 sites. Sites in 2024 and 2025 will receive their program funds at the beginning of the calendar year they are hosting in. So that is something to keep an eye out for at the beginning of the year when you're hosting. The $500 programming stipend is intended to support World on the Move programming related expenses. For a complete list of what is and is not considered an acceptable use of these funds, please check out the site support notebook or reach out to Em or myself. You're going to hear me mentioning the site support notebook quite a bit. This is basically a compilation of all the logistical details about the project. I really encourage you to familiarize yourself with this. I would say that the majority of the time, if you have a question about the project, there's a good chance the answer is there for you. Reporting requirements. We are going to ask for 3 reports from you during this tour, before, during, and after you've hosted. All of the reports will be assigned in ALA Apply. That's the grants management platform where you first applied for this opportunity. The way that system works, reports can only be assigned to one person from your library. So let us know if that contact has changed or the person who will need to access those reports is maybe different from the person who submitted the original grant. I know sometimes project director is different than the grant writer. And just to be clear, more than one person from your library can have an account in ALA Apply. It's just only one person can have access to any given report. So the first report you'll submit prior to receiving the exhibit is the pre-exhibit report. This will be due 45 days before the exhibition starts, and we will send reminders of the exact due dates for these to each site as these dates approach. In the pre-exhibit report, we will ask you to upload the proof of insurance, so we'll have record that the exhibit will be insured when it's in your care. We will also ask you to outline your programming plans in a program log. It's fine for these to change. We just want to see what sort of programs you're thinking about. Kind of simultaneously with this, Em will be setting up a call with you as the host and the ALA and AAA teams, as well as the project director from the previous host site. And the aim of these calls is to go over all of these logistics like we're talking about right now, but so that they're fresh in your mind right before you host. And it's also a great space for you to ask questions, especially since the previous host will be on the call. They can really offer tips about what worked well for them with programming, what maybe they did to get attendance numbers, marketing, and just answering any questions about setting the exhibit up as well, since they will have just done it recently. Once you get the exhibit, the next report is the condition report. This is where you'll let us know what the condition of the exhibit and packing crates are in when they arrive to you, and if there's anything that needs to be fixed before the show opens. Obviously, this exhibit is open to the public and will be on the road touring, but we really want to know if there is anything beyond normal light wear and tear so that we can get it repaired. And then the last report is the final report, which is due 2 weeks after the show closes. In this, we will be asking for some stats about attendance and circulation, as well as narrative questions about how you feel the project went. If your own organization's goals were achieved, as well as your community's response to the exhibit and programming. And I really encourage you to take a look at this before your host period, so you can be thinking about how to best collect this information as you host the exhibit and present programs. There are PDFs of each of these reports in that site support notebook, and they're also assigned to you within ALA Apply, so you can see them there and work on them incrementally before submitting. Em, if you'll go to the next slide, please. And so this, when you log into ALA Apply, this is your dashboard. You can see I have this giant arrow pointing. All of the forms have been assigned to you. You'll have to submit them chronologically. So the first one will be the pre-exhibit, then you can work on that, fill it out, submit it. Then the next one you'll be able to submit. That's what that edit button is. But you can preview any of them at any time. So you can either look for that PDF in the site support notebook or just look at it here within the system where you'll submit it. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so for the shipment of the exhibit, around the same time that Em is sending you those reminders about the pre-exhibit form and setting up the kickoff call, they'll also be sending reminders about the shipping process. ALA covers shipping costs, so libraries don't need to worry about that. We work with a company called Sterling for shipping this exhibition, and our contact there is Cindy Callahan. Cindy will reach out to you directly to coordinate the shipping logistics of the exhibit, and she usually reaches out about a week before the exhibit will be delivered. So if you have anything that you want to discuss with her, like loading dock issues or anything like that, you can work directly with Cindy on those things. We have provided her the shipping information that you submitted in your grant acceptance form. So please do let us know if any of those details have changed since you submitted that so that we can send her an update. After that initial check-in, Cindy will give you a 24-hour heads up before the exhibit is supposed to arrive at your library. Because of intricate shipping logistics that are not my wheelhouse, they are not able to give you an exact delivery time more than 24 hours ahead of time. Quite frankly, the exhibit shipment is really expensive, so we need to work with the schedules that they have in place. The exhibition will arrive to you just a few days before your tour start date so that you can troubleshoot and set everything up. And when it arrives to you, the exhibit will be in 7 crates that you will need to unpack. So plan ahead to have some help doing this and then constructing the exhibit. And my AA partners will We'll give you more details about the setup and the takedown in just a little bit. Because it does arrive to you just a few days before your tour is set to open, we do suggest that you begin your programming a couple days after that original opening date in your itinerary, just to allow time for any troubleshooting if necessary. And likewise, we recommend not scheduling any programs too close to the final date in your host period, so you have adequate time to pack the exhibit up before it's picked up by Sterling. Once the exhibit closes, Sterling does come just a few days after that closing date to pick it up, so we do recommend packing it up right away as soon as the exhibit closes. As previously mentioned, my colleague Megan is on this call. Megan and I are working on another project, that exhibit project that Sterling does the exhibition delivery for, and Megan is a pro at handling these shipments. So she's here in case there's any specific questions about that and can answer those at the end of the call. Marketing and community outreach. So we have a bunch of important resources available to you on the publicity page of that site support notebook. I told you I'd be mentioning it. And these are really intended to help support your marketing and community outreach. These publicity resources include the official exhibition credit that should appear on all of your printed and other visual materials. You'll find logos, which should be included on publicity materials, especially whenever it's smaller PR pieces and a full exhibition credit won't fit. We have guidelines for funder acknowledgement statements. So in addition to print or digital media, please also be sure to include oral acknowledgement of AAA, ALA, and the Smithsonian during public programs, or if you have any television spots or radio features. In that site support notebook, you'll find a sample press release that you can edit, as well as media templates. There are also editable web images for use on your website and social media. Most of these promotional materials we have are digital, but there are some printable promotional materials as well, and those include a printable and editable poster that you can put up at your library or around town, wherever, to promote the exhibit, and then also bookmarks. And you'll find that we have templates to help you promote that you received the exhibition and grant, and then additional ones to announce when the exhibition is actually open at your library and you're ready for visitors. Can't stress this enough. We really encourage you to take photos of the exhibition once it's installed in your space. These will be great to use on social media and in your promotions. And I know I said this before, but also in ALA Connect, just to give future sites ideas of how it can be configured and what it'll look like on site. So this checklist you're seeing, this is also in the site support notebook, but this provides an overview of important publicity reminders. We recommend that you start promotion of the exhibition and related programming about a month or two in advance so that you can meet media and other deadlines. And this advanced promotion will also help ensure you reach your attendance goals as well. More time for people to hear about it and get excited to come see it. And another key thing to remember, I know I've said this, is that you are free to edit any of the provided templates to fit your needs. But please do be sure to keep the credit lines and logos in place and follow the guidelines for acknowledgement. If you have any questions about any of this or any of the promotional materials that are available after you've looked through the site support notebook, don't hesitate to email us at publicprograms@ala.org. That will be on a slide at the end as well. And I think that is the end of my spiel about ALA logistics.
Thanks, Brian. This is Ed, and I wanted to just turn the discussion towards our online resources, not at the ALA public programs site, but at the understandingmigration.org website. And I was going to ask my colleague Caitlin Kohlhoff to talk some about the online resources. Caitlin?
Yeah, hi, this is Caitlin. And I know the Understanding Migration website has been shared with this group several times, but we're actually really excited about some updates that we're making to this site. So please continue to visit it, periodically in between now and when you're going to host the exhibit, because it's going to look different. We're adding quite a bit of content. But the first thing I want to bring your attention to that we have on this site is the virtual exhibition. So all of the content that you can find in the exhibit also lives online, and there's QR codes within the exhibit that tie back to this content online for a more accessible version for people who need that. And it's really cool because if you have like field trips coming and they, somebody can't make it to the actual exhibit, this provides them a way to also view that content and complete any course discussions or activities that a teacher might have related to the exhibit. They can go on the virtual exhibition and still interact with all of the same activities and content that they would in person. We even have the interactives online, and we're currently updating those to make them more interactive. We also have like additional resources that you can find, and they're listed under the Learn tab. Right, this is where you're going to see the most changes coming on the website. We're going to have pages based on different topics that you can find in the exhibit, such as how climate change and migration are connected. And students or visitors, parents will be able to go on Understanding Migration, click on that page, Climate Change and Migration, and find additional resources, including a list of books that they might be able to find within their local library. And I know Daniel asked through the Connect site for any recommendations, and that's been very helpful for us. Also, we have a community scrapbook, which people can submit their own photos, artifacts, stories, things that help share their journey of migration. And that's really cool. And we're working on putting all of those stories together too on the website. Additionally, we have 2 interns from Georgetown University who are working on an exhibit guide, and they're making excellent progress. So we should have a draft of this guide ready for the first site to sort of pilot, but it will have additional activities that people can view or people can walk through as they go through the exhibit. So it's going to include prompts that will ask them to think about resources within the library, to take a deeper dive, discussion questions that they can use for self-reflection, as well as interacting with their peers or family, and then some really in-depth activities that take the content from the exhibit and try to extend it. And some of those activities they might be able to complete in the library, and others they might need to take home and spend some more time on. And that exhibit guide is aligned to the C3 social studies framework. So we're really trying to make it so it's something that could be used informally for families or within a classroom. And then the teaching and learning materials, again, we're really building out that website and collecting sample syllabi, reading lists, podcasts, anything that could be used either within a classroom or by families or people who just want to take a deeper dive into this topic. And a lot of that is coming soon. Within the next few weeks, we should have some of that on our website.
Thanks, Caitlin. This is Ed again, and I just want to add one piece of information among the teaching and learning resources that will be available under the Learn tab, along with podcasts and these other materials, is an amazing collection of sound, audio, and music that we have access to, thanks to Jim and Sojin and Aaron and the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage at the Smithsonian, who, among the other things that they do, there is the summer Smithsonian Folklife Festival that has generated a lot of great recordings, and the Folkways recording album, and some of that music is also available too. So it's not all so there's a wealth of material that we're expecting to link to on the teaching and learning tab online. On site, we're hoping you all are, who we recognize are at varying stages in planning, might have some things to share with one another. And I wanted to ask our colleague Daniel Ginsberg if they would be willing to sort of walk through some points about on-site programming and events and activities. Daniel?
Yeah, sure. This is Daniel. Thanks, Ed. And thanks to Caitlin also for outlining all of the online things that are available. I think in some of these cases, you'll see that there are real connections between what's in the installation that you'll have in person, what's available on the website, and then we really tried to provide as much as possible to help you create different kinds of on-site programming that build off of it and give you opportunities to bring in different constituencies within your local community. And so, for example, one way to think about on-site programming is just about ways of leveraging the installation to also direct people back to the library collection. That's part of the reason that we reached out to all of you to help us brainstorm the books that we could list on the Learn pages on the website, is that we really want people to be thinking about other resources that are available to them just right there on site, even aside from what you've got in the installation. You've got so much more available on site, and I think it would be a missed opportunity not to help people make that connection. As far as youth and school outreach, as I think Ed mentioned before, that we were thinking that, you know, libraries don't have docents or interpreters the way that a museum would, and so the installation itself needs to be self-facilitated. But the exhibit guide, the little booklet that Caitlin talked about that we have the interns working on, is a piece of what that might look like. It's a supplemental material that people can work their way through as they're in the exhibit and then also afterward. And we were thinking, among the other things, you know, it could be just something that you have available either in print or digital format for people to take advantage of, but also it's something that school groups, for example, might be able to use. And that's why we tried to connect it to social studies standards, is so that then hypothetically, a social studies teacher could make the case and say, this connects with the curriculum that I'm teaching. I really need to bring my class into the library so that they can see this exhibition, do the exhibit guide, and then we can bring some of these activities back to class and have some of these conversations in our classroom. And so it's a great opportunity for you to leverage or build any relationships that you might like to strengthen with local schools around this exhibit. Community-based organizations similarly. So we've designed the content to be accessible to people. You know, we've tried to write it more or less on a 7th grade level. But that's not to say that general, you know, adult audiences couldn't also come in and have some of these conversations. And so, for example, when we had our soft launch of the exhibit in Washington, D.C., I saw someone mentioned that they saw the exhibition at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library in downtown DC. That building happens to be 2 blocks away from DC Chinatown. And so there was some public programming that took place in collaboration with local Asian American community organizations, just based on the exhibition being right there. And so whatever the analog of that might be in your community, again, like with the schools, any connections that you've been looking to establish or strengthen or leverage to be able to come together around this topic, because it does have so many different ramifications, so many different effects with so many different communities. And then the last thing that we had in mind is the idea that each residency of the exhibition can be an opportunity for that library to host a community conversation. You know, Ed talked a lot about the idea of crossroads, but I think you can also think about wherever you might want to be as being a sort of crossroads. And so how do you tell the story of your place? How do you bring in people, you know, whoever your library guests might be, to tell their own stories? So, for example, one thing that you'll see on our website is we have something called the World on the Move Community Scrapbook, where there's a web form that people can use to submit something about something that connects them with a place that they or someone family has moved from. It could be, we get a lot of photographs through that web form, but some of them are old family photographs, some of them are photographs of objects that have been handed down. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical object either. It could be a story or a song or a recipe or whatever you might have that connects you with some other place where you individually or you somewhere in your heritage may have come from at some point. So we're collecting those just from anyone who chooses to fill out the web form, and we're working on a way of displaying those on our website. But that's also the kind of community event that you could have within each place where the exhibition comes to be. And so talking to the people who come into the library, to the people who come into the exhibition about what their stories might be in whatever format makes sense for you. I think it would be really interesting to be able to establish, you know, to create something as a record of the time that World on the Move was in your library. We and our community came together and had this conversation, and this is the conversation that we had. And that's something that can stay with you even after the exhibition itself moves on. And then I asked for this final bullet point, what else to be added? Because I don't know what I don't know. You all live library community engagement and programming in ways that I can only speculate about. And so I wanted to leave that open and hold space for whatever you might see as being another way to really bring this alive and to have exciting events that would bring people into the library. Really, the goal is to strengthen the library. And if we want to use World on the Move as an excuse or a sort of a toy, a Happy Meal toy that you sort of hold it up as a shiny thing, but bring people in, those durable relationships that you have the opportunity to establish and strengthen are really, I think, going to be the enduring legacy in your communities of having been able to host this.
Thanks, Daniel. This is Ed again, and I wonder if at this point we could pause and ask you all to open your microphones or add to the chat. I've seen a few comments and suggestions about taking advantage of Heritage Months that happen to coincide with the exhibition's arrival in your town. But what else do you have in mind? Those of you who especially those in 23 and the early part of 24, who must be well along in planning for the programming of events and activities. Does anybody want to share something that they're doing that other people might benefit from hearing more about? Can we pick on Columbus? Since Columbus is first in line.
I had a feeling you were going to say that. Yes, you can pick on Columbus.
Okay, so what are you going to do, Kristen?
We actually have a slate of programs. Let me pull up our flyer. So our children's team is doing most of the programming, and they've planned things like bilingual and multicultural story times. There's someone that they've worked with in the past who's going to come and do a Music of Argentina program and then a Music of Egypt program. I think those are for ages like 7 to 11. And then we have a couple adult programs. A community organization that we're partnering with for the exhibit is called Community Refugee and Immigration Services, and they actually have their own speakers bureau. So we're going to host a New American panel for more teen adult audiences at the library. And our other big adult program is we're having an archaeologist from our state history organization in Columbus who's going to present on the Hopewell Road, which was a road that connected two of like our biggest ancient sites in Ohio. And it was, you know, a big road for the transfer of ideas and people and goods and things like that. And then, but our big thing that we're doing is our children's team is hosting a teen art show. And Columbus Metropolitan Library has 23 branches across our system. So the exhibit will be at our main library downtown, but this is the big way for our branch communities to participate. So branch staff will be collecting artwork from teens. It could be a variety of media, you know, like digital art, drawings, poems, paintings, things like that, that in some way tell part of, you know, their migration story or relate to the themes of immigration and migration. And then we'll have a big kind of closing reception on the last day of the exhibit where all of the art will make their way to main library. We'll have their artwork set up on the same floor, but in a different part of the library from where the World on the Move panels will be. And there will be some judges from some of our community partners and some speakers from other local organizations that help new Americans get acclimated in Columbus, and they can win awards, and we'll have cake. So, and the teens, actually, the library has a teen advisory board, and one of our other partner organizations also has a teen youth group. So they're actually getting together to do the planning for most of the teen events will be planned by teens. So that's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with.
That is exciting, and the participatory dimension to it is fantastic. And I think that many of you are in systems that have multiple branches too, and so ways of including the branches that aren't actually hosting the physical exhibit throughout your system. That just sounds like a really terrific lineup of programs. Thanks for that, Kristen. How about some of the rest of you?
Hello, this is Tammy Moe from Gallup, New Mexico. How is everybody doing today? Good, yeah?
Yeah.
So we have a lot of different ideas. Nothing has been really solidified yet, but we have many partners in our community to cover the gamut of generations. So we're partnering with Art 123, which is the main gallery here in Gallup, New Mexico. Some of the ideas they have had are, we have a lot of murals that are around this town, reinterpreting those murals in different ways to tell different narratives. We're a border town, and so we sit in the middle of 3 indigenous reservations. 77% of our service population is indigenous, and so really engaging with that community to see what their viewpoint is on migration, because many of them will tell you that they have not migrated, that they were here occupying this land from the beginning. And so really kind of looking at that idea. And we have a cultural center here with Terry Frazier, who is an indigenous expert. She taught on the school systems, and she'll be doing probably more of that indigenous engagement. It just so happens that we're lucky the exhibit is coming through during our Intertribal Indian Ceremonial, which is a very unique event that 100 years now that they've been doing it, and tribes come from all around to dance and show their wares. They have it's a huge influx of people during that time. So we're really excited about that, because we'll be able to get people from outside of Gallup, New Mexico engaged in this exhibit and really expand the conversation. We have partners at the university here for University of New Mexico that will be doing programs at that level. And also, I'm trying to think if I missed somebody. The McKinley County School District. Now, the schools won't be in session when we have the exhibit, so we're really going to start promoting that and engaging with them early on, probably in May, towards the end of the school year, so that they're aware of it. But I think it's going to be art, music, ethnographic collections, really just kind of trying to get the melding of the voices that are here in Gallup, New Mexico. Thank you, Melody.
That is just really exciting, Tammy, and of course one of the curatorial team's original intents was to make plenty of space, both in physical space if you have it, and programming events and activities to relate these big themes to local circumstances. So we're really glad to hear that. And if you're not following in the chat, you can see that we've heard from Melody, who has the exhibit coming right after Columbus, and also Glen Ellen, Illinois. Maggie Toman is reporting on something that's a little later in the tour.
Yeah, we'll definitely share as much as we can. We're talking about doing a World on the Move podcast actually here as a way to engage even nationally and internationally the different people who would be interested in this, and collecting oral histories as we go along the way. So thank you very much for choosing us. We're really excited to have this coming.
Other people want to share about programming plans or possibilities in your town? Well, I think we have the benefit of the ALA Connect as plans develop to be able to share with people, and then of course the experience afterwards in what was working particularly well, and what kind of learnings there are to be gained from that. There is of course a set of practical things that you should be aware of when this truck with 7 crates on wheels comes to your town. And I wonder if I could just put Aaron Younger on the spot for a minute to point people in the right direction for guidance on the installation and maintenance of the exhibit.
Hi, sure. I would be happy to, and I'm very excited to hear, firstly, all these programming ideas. It's just, this was the dream and it's happening, which is very exciting. And another part of my dream was that this would be a manageable, pretty straightforward installation task for your teams. And we've done everything we can to make it as straightforward as possible. As the the author of the installation guide, I can say we collectively made an effort to be extremely thorough and as logical as makes sense. So we hope that it provides everything you might have a question about. However, I also am happy to hear about this back and forth area on the website as you get tips, ideas that are not in the guide. Please let us know. I'll just say a few more things, and then I do want to disclaim a certain bit of my own expertise in that I was observing and making notes as Caitlin and Daniel and another person were doing the installation work. So they're really the hands-on team, and you know, can also sort of demystify some of the many words. But it is quite logical. It looks complicated. One reason we have a day and a half to 2 days for install, deinstall, that really is flexible and depends, but want to be sure that there's enough time for you all to think through the layout. I mean, that's like the first step. And then once you get going, I think Daniel and Caitlin would say, once you figure out how to do that first module, the rest is very straightforward because it's modular. They're all essentially the same. But it's also wise to go slowly, be careful, or just thorough as you go through and make sure, double check that you're building the right stack of things. Everything is numbered. There are lots of photographs, both online and printed out. And so I don't know what else to say. Maybe Daniel and Caitlin, do you want to say something about what it's like to open that first crate and figure out what to do? Or
Sure, this is Daniel. I guess, the first thing I would say is I'm looking forward to meeting with each group when you're about to host the exhibition, because I wouldn't expect to give any practical tips today that will be memorable enough for folks who are hosting in 2025 to still find it useful. So there are a lot of details. What we've found, I guess, just in terms of how long does it take, seems to be a question that is coming to mind a lot. Once we sort of figured out what we were doing, it takes like a team of 3 people one day, or 2 teams of 3 people working simultaneously a half a day to get the whole thing set up. That was about our rule of thumb, I think, and about the same to deinstall. One time we thought that we were going to put you know, module 2 here and module 3 there, and we got them reversed by accident. And then once we had them set up, we took a look at them and it was like, no, this works fine as well, right? And so that's, I think, one of the benefits of us having designed something that is meant to fit into a variety of space configurations, as long as you've got enough like square footage, is that it's not really strict in terms of what people see first and what people see next, which is to say it's kind of forgiving in how you set it up. We made a different blunders where sometimes it was easy to fix it, and sometimes it was we could just look at it and say, you know what, it really doesn't matter. We may as well just leave it. We're the only ones who are ever going to know that we had intended something else. So I guess I would say up until the point when you're actually making practical decisions, if you're thinking ahead to what is it like to build this thing, don't stress about it. It's I am not a professional exhibition builder. I learned how to do it with this one. And now, you know, Caitlin and I have worked on install, deinstall twice, and we've had a handful of other people who have joined us for various parts of that. And, you know, once you get up to it, if you're stuck and you need help troubleshooting, you can reach me at ALA Connect. And, you know, I would even be glad to make an appointment for a Zoom call so that you can take me through on your phone and show me, you know, here's a thing that we're trying to figure out how this fits with that thing. Does this, would you recommend this or that? And we'll be available for those conversations. So yeah, if you have done something like this before, I wouldn't expect it to be that difficult. And if you haven't, it looks like a lot. It's 7 big crates, and you open them up and they've got a lot of little pieces inside. But it's the easiest Lego set you ever built. It just happens to be enormous.
Well put.
I will jump in really quickly and will say I have never put this together. I have been lucky enough to get to see it in situ, but did not have to do the actual construction. But I think something that's so ingenious about this is that there are printouts so that you can lay it out in your space to see what configuration will actually work the best for you. I've moved furniture around many times, and I think that really, like, once you can kind of visualize it that way, it really helps picture what will be best for, you know, the flow in your space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point, and I think that's, well, it is why we've emphasized, be sure to leave enough time, or don't feel badly if it takes you a bit of time to figure out, because literally you put those templates down on the floor and it really helps you imagine, oh, if we walk in this way, we don't want to see the back of that, we want to see the front. And while these are sort of, they're made of masonite and they're kind of a little bit awkward, but in fact, they work just fine. And you, you can just push them around on the floor with your feet. You don't have to bend and stoop. So my main piece of advice would be to take the time to just figure it out. No, it'll take a little bit of time. And then once you get rolling, as Daniel said, it's amazing how fast it goes. And we do recommend teams of either 3 or 6 because it's a little bit tippy at a certain point in construction. So it's nice to have that third person to hold, you know, the not yet stable panel up. But it's not too tricky. So any questions from those of you out there, or you want to wait and talk to Daniel closer to the time?
So Aaron, this is Ed. One thing I will say, I'm not sure we said it out loud, but I see that Maggie has made a comment in the chat. We did make a set of videos, one for assembling and installing the exhibit and one for taking it down. We ought to make that just required viewing, that you watch the video. And there is, Megan has put in the chat a link to this extensive installation guide that takes you crate by crate through the installation. You should read that first and have it handy. There is a paper copy of it that's included in the crate, and in each crate there are some some other printed materials that will help keep you oriented as you go through the installation.
Yeah. And you don't have to memorize anything, really. It's not that hard, but it is a reference guide. So you should presumably be able to find anything you're wondering about. And, you know, as I say, I look forward to hearing, we all look forward to hearing how it goes without, you know, someone who's already done it, but it's intended to be straightforward. And this system is used all over. The Smithsonian Exhibition Division recommended it for us, and they, of course, do lots of traveling exhibits. And it, as Ed mentioned earlier, it doesn't require a professional team, so should be fun. And it's I think a lot of fun to pull out those panels and see them, the photographs become life size, and you know, I think the scale works well. So it should hopefully be fun.
Kyle, I see you have a question.
Yeah, this may be something that I've just missed, but I looked through the installation guide and I've looked at some of the other materials, and I can't find the exact dimensions of the actual modules. So I don't know if I'm just missing it, but
those are not actually called out in the guide per se, but there is the other material should be there, Ed, right? The graphic design documents and the architectural documents.
I can speak to
that
that.
Have all the measurements. Yeah, please.
Yes,
do.
those are in the site support notebook on the logistics page. They're listed, yeah, I believe as the three-dimensional model or dimension guide, right in the list right above the installation guide.
Yeah, and you will see. I guess the height isn't listed on the floor plans, but the length is. But yeah, those. I'm sorry that they're not in here, but they are easy enough to find in the support materials, and those were the plans that the Smithsonian developed for us. It's hard to represent them on small pieces of paper because they tend to be pretty big, but when it's online, you can zoom it up and see all of them.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments for Erin or about the installation itself?
Great.
Well, thank you. And I think that this for us was the end of what we wanted to call to your attention at the beginning, except some very important information, the contact information that I think is on your next slide, Em, for the Public Programs Office at ALA. Do you want to advance the slide, Em?
Sorry, I had screen shared paused while we were chatting and I was finding links. Here we go.
Okay, so Brian and Em are key contacts, and Megan as well at the Public Programs Office. And since you're interested, if we could go to the very last slide here, talking about it taking a village to assemble this exhibition, we couldn't do this without an enormously dedicated group of folks over a long period of time that helped with the content development, that that provided outside helpful reviews to us. We did do some testing at the Folklife Festival itself and in the a couple of branches of the DC Public Library, all under the watchful guidance of an international Advisory Board, and with great gratitude to funding organizations that you see here. And as Aaron has mentioned, the Smithsonian Exhibition Group, Smithsonian Exhibits, and the fabrication of the exhibit itself was done in Chicago by a group called Ravenswood Studio. So thank you to all of these amazingly committed folks. Brian M., comments, questions, closing thoughts?
Well, I guess I will just say, I know we had just been doing questions, but if there's any other questions, you know, we're all here. We have some time. If there's anything else people want to know, I know there had been a question about shipping that was answered in the chat, but just so it's said aloud, the exhibit shipping pickup will work the exact same way as when it's delivered. Cindy will get in touch about a week ahead of time and let you know kind of when to expect the pickup, and then the day before she'll get in touch with like the exact time of, and I think the name too of who's coming, and give you a contact on the ground. Are there any other questions? That was the only one that I had noticed in the chat.
Brian, this is Ed, and one thing I will say, I have personally moved all 7 of these crates from the loading dock to the place where they are currently staged in a conference room in the association offices in suburban Washington, D.C. They're on wheels, and they're very straightforward to push. I wouldn't say easy, but they're straightforward. It's better if you have a couple of people who are doing the loading and unloading, and then if it wasn't made apparent to you in the materials that we shared with you, you are going to need to find a place to store the 7 empty crates while the exhibition is up and on display. They happen to have a great storeroom that was near the exhibition place on the same floor at the main branch of the DC Public Library. But just a heads up as you think about this, that the crates do take up a bit of space.
And I believe if you're wondering about how much space do I need, the measurements of the crates, that's in the site support notebook as well.
Yeah.
In case you're trying to plan, like, where exactly will I put these?
Right.
Okay.
So I see Jeff Dawson has entered a question in the chat about a script or some guidance for tour guides. There are, as Caitlin mentioned earlier, we have some folks that are putting one together right now. We hope to have a draft of that available by the time the first tour stop in Columbus. And as Daniel is saying here now, it calls out a lot of the interactives. If there are additional things that you'd like to know, we do have a sort of technical report currently unpublished, but it is available through an open access repository. And I will put the URL to that here, and you can search for the Crossroads paper. Open Anthropology Research.org is the website for our association's open access anthropology research repository. And we do have a copy of a paper that is authored by the curatorial team that describes the exhibit in some detail. Daniel has another paper that they wrote that was published in an open access journal called Teaching and Learning in Anthropology that talks about the sort of educational objectives of the exhibition. And we can get you that link as well. That should help Jeff with tour guide.
This is Daniel. If I could add to that, when I said talkback questions, what I'm thinking of is as you set up the exhibition, as you go through it, you'll notice that a lot of the actual panels of the installation will have a question that's meant to prompt visitors to think about how they would respond or relate to whatever that panel is presenting. Here's a story about someone's experience, and then at the bottom in a different typeface it says, "Has anything like this ever happened to you?" But more specific, I'm just sort of saying generically. And I guess the first thing that I would recommend to somebody who's trying to lead tours, and that might be if you do have access to somebody who could be a docent, if you're thinking about teen volunteers, is to try to call people's attention to those questions and prompt their group to, answer and discuss their answers among themselves. Those are going to be, they're going to figure prominently in the exhibit guide as the pieces of the exhibit guide that are doable sort of within the exhibition as people are going through it. And existing in that document alongside of other things that are more involved and might take more time to get through. But I think that I would with those and build out from there.
And this is Caitlin. If you want to see like examples of those talkback questions or really view all of them, they're in the virtual exhibit and they're really clear. Like they say talkback question and then they have the question in the virtual exhibit. So if you want to see them before you actually get the exhibit, that's a spot you can go to.
I'm not seeing any more questions. Give it a minute, but I really want to say thank you so much to Caitlin, Daniel, Sojin, Jim, Aaron, and Megan, all for sharing their knowledge today. Thank you so much to Ed for your help leading this conversation. And thank you to the American Anthropological Association and the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage for making this entire project possible. Thank you so much to all of our library hosts for making the time in your schedule to participate today and for everything you're going to do in the coming months and years to bring this exhibit and the conversations it will spark to your communities across the country. We will be sharing the recording of this today and all of the links that we've been dropping to the related resources in a follow-up email in the coming days, probably Monday. Please stay in touch. We really look forward to hearing more from you in ALA Connect. We can't wait to hear more about your programs, see those pictures as you post them there. If you have any questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out to M. Gallagher or myself. Thank you all so much and have a happy Friday.